Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Got a lot to cover on the show. It is a Fantasy Football Tuesday, so we are looking at the waiver wire, the Fantasy Football Dumpster Darlings from week number 12, a gigantic trade in the Canadian Football League, and gigantic moves that could be coming in Major League Baseball. All of that is coming up on the show today. Obviously, been a little bit off for the last little bit. I've been over on Sportsnet 960 for the last couple of weeks, and was hoping to kind of get back into a bit more of a regular swing with this particular thing, and then I got sick, and still a little bit sick, so hence the recorded nature of these shows, and nothing live. And the no live, again, is probably going to stick around for the next couple of weeks in podcast form anyway, hoping to do a little bit more video game playing on there, but we'll see. Anyway, let's get right into things now and start talking about fantasy football. It is week number 13. Unreal how quick this year has gone by as we get ready for things in the National Football League. That is so quick. I have to look that up. Is that actually right? Are we for reals going into, week 13 starts Thursday at 10:30 Mountain Time. It's unbelievable how quickly this year has just flown by. And now, obviously, getting into some very big moments in the fantasy football season. So let's look at the waiver wire. We have at quarterback, Drake May, 19% owned. I don't take the Indianapolis Colts defense overly seriously, and I think Drake May is actually kind of good. And so if you are running into some bye week issues, I think that this is absolutely a player that you can run out there as your quarterback and still give you a pretty good chance of winning your fantasy football week, or at least he's not going to lose it for you. At the wide receiver spot, we have a couple. First, it is Xavier Legette. He is 27% rostered. The Panthers are facing the Buccaneers, who, despite what we saw from this week, they can be beat through the air. And Bryce Young is proving that he is at least okay when it comes to being a quarterback in this league. So I think that there could be some value in Xavier Legette, and he is someone who I think has a really, really high ceiling. And actually, all three of the wide receiver picks this week, from a fantasy football standpoint, are guys who are kind of high ceiling type players. And maybe if you're looking to just play it safe, maybe these guys aren't for you, because they could absolutely have terrible weeks this week. But I think if you are looking for a bit of a home run swing, I think these are the guys that you can pick up. And I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling at 25% owned is another one. Back-to-back double-digit games, now facing the Rams, who give up the 10th most points in in fantasy football to wide receivers. I think that's a pretty good matchup for MVS. And the only thing that is holding us back is that we've seen MVS not take advantage of situations before. You look at situation, he's the only pass catcher that is healthy, really, on this team. You look at past performance, like I just said, back-to-back double-digit games, and you look at the matchup, and it seems like a good one. So everything is there, lining up for MVS to have another good week. We will see if we can trust it. And then if you are looking for just a absolute Barry Bonds, bottom of the ninth, 2-out home run swing, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is 12% rostered. Clearly, he has become the Titans' big play guy over the last couple of weeks, and Washington can get got in that way. He is not a consistent option, even a little bit. And this is 100% chasing the points from the last couple of weeks. But if you are in need of a big home run swing, this is a guy who can take those cuts. At the running back spot, there's a couple. First, Gus Edwards, 27% rostered. J.K. Dobbins gets banged up on Monday night, so this could be Edwards' chance to jump in and kind of get back that value that a lot of people thought he had at the beginning of the season. And then Jeremy McNichols, 1% rostered. Both Commanders running backs got banged up, and Eckler's look really, really scary. McNichols, I think in an offense that does seem like it's maybe turning back into a pumpkin a little bit, I still think that he is a player who can absolutely step up and come up with a big-time performance. So I think McNichols at 1% rostered is certainly someone that you should maybe give a look to at the running back spot. At tight end, this is again chasing it a little bit, but Noah Gray, he is 4% rostered. He just keeps scoring touchdowns, and the Raiders haven't been able to defend the tight end basically in my entire lifetime. So it feels like there is something coming here. Also, I know we can A lot of people have lost a lot of money, assuming that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to whoop that ass on some kind of an opponent that they are facing. The Raiders kind of embarrassed them. Around this time last year, actually. National Spotlight, I could see this being a game that Kansas City's like, oh, you think you're, Shania Twain, you think you're special? That don't impress me much. And just go out there and just beat the tar out of these guys. So I think there could be something there for Noah Gray this week. And if we're looking to stream a defense, Dallas Cowboys at 29%. They're facing the Giants, whose offense was ass. And the Seattle Seahawks, just 9% rostered. They're facing the Jets. See note above. But the offense is falling apart. And this Seattle defense, it's getting healthier and it's getting better. This is a defense that I think you can trust down the stretch as well. So fantasy football. Those are the waiver wire options, I think, for the week. Quickly running through them one more time. At quarterback, Drake May. Wide receivers, Xavier Legette, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Nick Westbrook-Akine. At running back, it is Gus Edwards and Jeremy McNichols. Our tight end, Noah Gray. And on defense, Dallas or the Seattle Seahawks. So those are the players to look at going into this week. And why do we think that we could find some winners on the waiver wire? I will tell you. Because we have seen some very low rostered players come up with some very high points. We run through them every week. It's called the Fantasy Football Dumpster Darlings. Let's take a look. It is time for the Fantasy Football Dumpster Darlings. The players who, out of nowhere, and probably to the help of absolutely no one, come up with gigantic fantasy football weeks, helping to drag whatever team they were on into either a victory or a lot of frustration because these players were left on the bench. So each week I run through the top performances from the low-rated players and see what a full team of that would look like, just to show us how absolutely cruel fantasy football can be. At quarterback, Cooper Rush. 5% owned, 17.98 fantasy points. Our wide receiver almost beat that for the 0% rostered that David Moore is. He put up 17.1 fantasy points. I didn't put what team David Moore plays for on here, and I've already forgotten. Calvin Austin III, 1% owned, which seems high, comes in at 15.3 fantasy points. Our running back this week, Amir Abdullah, 25% owned, which is entirely too high, comes in at 15 fantasy points. Our RB2 basically got all of this on one play, but Justice Hill at 20% owned, 13.2 fantasy points. The tight end, not Travis Kelce, it's Noah Gray, 4% owned, 20.6 fantasy points. This week we're running a 2 tight end set because Austin Hooper's in our flex. For the nobody that rostered him, he put up 13.5 fantasy points. Our defense, Seattle, 9% rostered, 20 fantasy points. And our kicker this week at 1% is Nick Folk. So all that together, got a couple running backs who are owned on a lot of teams. Aside from that, no actual players owned on more than 5% of rosters, and you could put together a team at 135.68 fantasy points. The gems are out there. You just got to dig through a lot of garbage each week to try to find them. Those are the dumpster darlings for Week 12 in the National Football League. That is 4-down football. Let's move to 3-down as a gigantic trade happened in the Canadian Football League today. Calgary Stampeders pull off a gigantic move to start the offseason as they have acquired Vernon Adams for a bunch of picks and then also acquiring a bunch of picks. They don't have to give up the first overall pick in the draft for it, and it makes for a very intriguing situation down the road. First and foremost, fantastic trade. I was on Sportsnet 960 today chatting with John Hodge, and I said it would have been personally insulting to the BC Lions how quickly I would have accepted this trade if I was the Stampeders and they offered it to me. It would have hurt their feelings how quickly yes, 100 times yes, if they came to me with that trade for Vernon Adams. I think this is a home run deal for the Calgary Stampeders in every sense. This is the quarterback that they have needed since Bo Levi Mitchell left. This is the change in culture and attitude around this team that they have needed since Bo Levi Mitchell left, but certainly in the last couple of years as well. And it is the spark that this franchise has needed over the last few years as the fan base and attendance starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. This is the guy that you need. It is a slam dunk home run 100% you make this deal from a Stampeders standpoint. The only downside is that he is in his 30s and he got hurt last year, so he could get hurt again. But we are coming off of, I believe, back-to-back CFL seasons where every team used at least 2 quarterbacks. So, and it's what we said about Tua Tagovailoa in the NFL. Every quarterback, every player in football is one play away and one big hit away from your season being altered. Vernon Adams, I guess it's kind of the same, but I believe that this is a huge move for the Calgary Stampeders to try to get back on everyone's radar here. From a football standpoint, it is quite different. And now, mentioned this with John Hodge, and he brought up the point that you certainly can have teams like, part of what I'm about to say is offensive philosophy, and part of it is the personnel that they had. But Vernon Adams threw almost 200 fewer passes than Jake Maier did this season, and Vernon Adams attempted more passes, 20 or more yards downfield, than Jake Maier tried this season. That's absurd, and just shows, it does show a bit of the conservative nature for the Stampeders offense, but it also showed that Vernon Adams loves chucking the ball downfield. And that is an aspect that this team has, I think, desperately lacked over the last couple of seasons. And so I think to bring in this sort of a talent signifies that there is going to be a bit of a direction change. And I think it also signifies to the rest of the league that all this shit you've been hearing about Calgary for the last little bit, that's going away now. We have a team that is going to be one that should be respected in the Canadian Football League. And I think that this is a guy who can kind of send that message to the rest of the league. This is a culture setter, and this is a trend setter, really, in the CFL. And I think he will be able to, like Hodge said before, he will be able to acquire, or help the Stampeders anyway, acquire some really strong talent in terms of free agency and start to change the perception, because Calgary has been just taking a beat. Winnipeg didn't get beat this bad in the Grey Cup. It is Calgary who is getting all of the different shots from specifically Toronto Argonauts players talking about everything that was going on there and all of the issues that have kind of come up with this team. So it has been... It is a desperately needed facelift for the Calgary Stampeders, and a move that I think is going to really help them out in terms of being competitive in the CFL's West Division. They have a long way to go. Do not hear what I'm not saying. They got a long way to go. But given the nature of the Canadian Football League, there's a lot of players who are available in free agency this year, and I think that this really does send a message. The other big thing coming out of this now is they have the first overall pick, and the number 1 player from the CFL Scouting Bureau is Curtis Rorick. Now, Adams very recently had a bit of a bad experience with a team he was playing on bringing in a dude with the last name Rorick, who happened to be Canadian, to come in and play quarterback. This situation would be a little bit different. As Hodge again mentioned with me on Sportsnet today, that if you draft Rorick, you are drafting him with the understanding that he ain't playing for you this year. And maybe not even next year. But there is the potential that at somewhere down the line, he makes his way back to the Canadian Football League. And so there is a bit of a long-term play with this. But Adams is only 31. And so, like we are seeing right now, Trevor Harris, 38 years old, had his team within a game of the Grey Cup. Now, they play different styles, and I don't know how well Adams is going to age necessarily, but I also think he is a good enough and talented enough quarterback that even as certain physical aspects start to go, he can kind of adapt that way. So you could see him being the quarterback for the Stamps for the next 5-7 years even. And so if you are using a draft pick on Rorick to be that guy, and maybe be your future, then I would find that a bit of a tough sell on a Vernon Adams. And so if it were me, I probably wouldn't go that particular direction. You can see it, and in perfect football utopia, you have Vernon Adams be the guy. Rorik goes off, plays a couple of years for whoever as their backup, and whenever decides to come back, and then you have VA who can kind of nurture him and grow him along. And then there's a perfect pass off. And once again, the Calgary Stampeders have excellent quarterback play for between a couple of different eras for over a decade. And I don't even I feel like Vernon Adams, the way he handled the Rorik situation in BC, would actually be kind of okay with that. But it is a bit of an awkward situation. And so honestly, I think that because you have a fan base that has, for lack of a better term, left you and is a little bit disgruntled right now, I think you can very, very easily sell to this fan base. Look, we got Vernon Adams. Let's go out and get now another Canadian wide receiver, let's say, because that's the next spot. The next guy is a wide receiver. I'm forgetting the name right now. Apologies. But, or let's go out and address another need here with another Canadian, and let's just go. We can put VA on the season tickets. We can put this number 1 overall pick on the season tickets and whatever free agents we sign and really start to build this thing up. So it seems ridiculous because this team was close to a dynasty not 5 years ago, but the pressure is really on. And I don't know if Dave Dickinson right now can afford the long view, so to speak. And I think that was signified with this move for Vernon Adams. On the Lions side, it's better work. Like Rorik better figure it out, because this could be catastrophic on the BC side. They didn't get a ton. It is technically kind of like getting a first-round pick because Edmonton loses theirs in the supplemental draft. So this is the pick they're getting from Calgary is the 9th overall pick, which probably put this offer over the top for them compared to other CFL teams who maybe didn't want to offer a first-round pick. But this, I think, does kind of help It does help and it doesn't help the BC Lions because it gets the quarterback controversy gone. They were able to move up in the draft in a couple of different areas, but this now has a ton of pressure on Nathan Rorik to be that guy again, because if they have another down year out there, again, I think the pressure is on with the BC Lions. So it's very interesting how things can shift in the Canadian Football League. That's one sport that's in its offseason. Another one that had a bit of a slow start to the offseason, which means it's still we still have some time to get a couple of predictions in. Let's pick the landing spots for key free agents in Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball free agency is upon us, and what a start it has been. Kinda. We've barely had any movement so far, unless you're the LA Angels or a really fun trade between the Reds and the Kansas City Royals. So, luckily for us, baseball has given us the opportunity to still predict where some of these key free agents are going to land. We all know the Juan Soto one is going to be the main one, so we're going to save that for the end. My prediction, starting from the bottom of my list and working my way up. Luis Severino, I have him going to the San Francisco Giants. This is the type of prove-it pitcher contract that they have been living off of lately. And so I think that he did prove it a little bit with the Mets, but then not a ton with the Mets. And so I think that the Giants would be a very smart landing spot for him. Tanner Scott, I have him going to the Toronto Blue Jays. You will probably notice a pattern, and you can probably pick up on who my favorite team would be if you are watching my content for the first time. Yes, I am a Blue Jays fan, and I am very aware of the desperation around this team. And so, admittedly, going through this, budget-wise, I don't got a fucking clue how they're going to pull this off, but we'll see how they do it. Because I think that there is an absolute desperation in Toronto for this team to get better immediately. And so one area where they need to, they just let Jordan Romano walk probably, which got a lot more buzz than it needed to. A 31-year-old closer coming off of elbow problems who the team had do a workout a week before they non-tendered him and then let him go to free agency. And it's, oh, they strung him along. It's like, look, I am all for getting just unreasonably worked up about something the Blue Jays front office did or didn't do. This one ain't it. Like, let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. But I do think that Toronto does spend this offseason and does so very aggressively. And so I think Tanner Scott is going to be the guy that, or one of the guys that the Blue Jays spend on to help kind of upgrade the pitching situation there. Christian Walker, everyone and their dog has him going here, but I think it is such a perfect fit to put him with the Yankees. He is the power bat that this middle of the lineup really needs outside of Judge and maybe Soto. They need a first baseman because Anthony Rizzo isn't going to be there anymore. And so this just feels like a perfect match there in New York. Teoscar Hernandez. Back to the Blue Jays. Again, you can see where my bias is coming in here a little bit, but one of the things that I think Toronto was really lacking over the last couple of years is some joy in their game. And that might be really reductive to just, they didn't play well because they weren't happy. And then you get into the loop of, winning makes you happy and blah, 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 blah. But I think you saw last year, Vladdy, with some of the young kids, he was really starting to enjoy himself and really starting to have some fun again. And that's when he just started launching the bejesus out of every baseball that came at him. And he had one of the better seasons of anyone in the majors last season. So I think that you kind of throw your guy a bone. You bring back a good friend of his from what it appeared. It wasn't the perfect exit, I don't think. But I do think that he fits what they need right now as a power bat in that outfield, a desperately needed power bat in that outfield, and kind of allows them to improve the talent and the vibes at the same time. The LA Angels, I have them signing Sean Manaea. Seems like the depth pitching move that they do quite a bit. Now, I did make this list before Yusei Kikuchi signed a surprisingly expensive contract with the Los Angeles Angels, but I do think that this is still a depth type of a piece that they will bring in and probably try to flip at the trade deadline for literally anything. Anthony Santander, I'm kidding. I have him going to the Seattle Mariners. This is a Mariners team that has figured out the pitching thing, and now they need to get offense going in a big time way. Obviously, they lose Teoscar Hernandez, trading him away to the Dodgers. I don't see that being a reunion, but I see them being aggressive in free agency and going out and getting an Anthony Santander. Jack Flaherty, I have him going back to the Detroit Tigers. It worked well there. Why not go for it again? As the Tigers, things started going very well post-trade deadline, but I think that is another big arm that they can throw out there. Pete Alonso. The Toronto Blue Jays. Yes, again, probably some homerism coming into this one here, but the Blue Jays, again, desperate for some power in the middle of that lineup. Designated hitter-wise, who knows what they are going to be doing this season, and so I think Alonso can fit in there. He can play some first base if Vlad moves over to third, and can also play some first base, allowing Vlad to DH. So I think, again, look, you're not signing Pete Alonso for the flexibility that it provides you, so I think that this is a move that they still need to make because of the power that he can bring to the middle of that order. I'm going to kind of bounce around on my own sheet. Probably didn't need to tell you that, but it makes sense for my moves here. Corbin Burns, I have him going to the Mets. I think the Mets need an ace to make a move up in this division. They are obviously very willing to spend a lot of capital to go out and try to make that happen. And so I think that he is a perfect fit for the New York Mets. Max Fried, then I have going to the Baltimore Orioles to recover the loss from Corbin Burns, go out and add someone who at his best can be one of the best pitchers in baseball. Willie Adames, I have him also going to the Toronto Blue Jays. Part of it could be some insurance if Bo doesn't stick around. If Toronto does move on from Bo, then Willie Adames just fits right up the middle and again can provide pretty good bat. If they do want to hang out with Bo Bichette a little bit longer, then I don't know that he wouldn't. You could probably put one of them at second base, would be my assumption. You could probably make that work. And then offensively, it gives you a juggernaut team. So if I'm right on all the Blue Jays picks, all of a sudden this team has completely redesigned their offense. And so given how Blue Jays off seasons have gone, I'm probably very wrong. Blake Snell, I have him sticking with the San Francisco Giants. This is a team that I think needs to have a very good offseason, and I don't have them getting a lot of the bigger names. So I think sticking with your guy who can win a Cy Young, I think that makes sense a little bit. So I'm going to go with him. Alex Bregman, now we're getting to the real big names here. I have him going to Seattle. this is an offense that needs that big bat. He brings some experience as well, coming from a championship winning team. He stays out in the West Division, and I think he can now be a leader for the Seattle Mariners team, who, again, I think probably has a little bit of incentive to be quite aggressive this year in free agency. And then Juan Soto, I have him going to the Yankees. It just, as I've made it very clear, Blue Jay fan here, he's a Yankee. You know, like, would obviously love for him to be a Blue Jay. Still not buying it at all. He's a Yankee. If he stays in New York and goes to the Mets, it's going to be a bit of a downer to me, to be perfectly honest with you. And this is someone who would love to not have to face him in my division for the next decade of my life. But he fits the city. He fits the team. He fits the ballpark perfectly. He fits the swagger and the aura that my generation would associate with the New York Yankees. Not this haven't won a World Series in over a decade thing. 15 years now, by the way. None of that stuff. But the team that was out there and just buying championships and buying pennants and doing all of these things. He is that guy. And so I can't come on here a few weeks ago and do the big money baseball is back and then, but you know what? I think that this guy's going to whoever. Like, no, it is the Yankees. And if he doesn't go to New York to play for the Yankees, I shudder to think at the counter that this team would do to try to fill that spot. Because I do not think it would be rational what would happen out in New York after that. But I just, again, for as much as I would despise it, every aspect of it fits perfectly for Juan Soto to go to New York. Stay in New York and stay in pinstripes, the Yankee kind. That's going to do it for this show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Again, nothing live probably for the rest of the week. Might have something on Friday because I'm not on the radio here on Friday. But still, keep it locked to my social medias. I'm at Primetime Klein everywhere, and we will get this thing, you'll figure out the schedule here, but we will hopefully get back to the live stuff in a couple of weeks time. Thank you all so much for hanging out. NFL Power Rankings tomorrow. Talk to y'all then. I am out.